we were working with a large U.S. Home improvement retailer, and they were doing network segmentation. But for them, they went to a couple servers, pulled connectivity data, and it ended up with a spreadsheet that was 750,000 lines long. And those guys were like, I mean, I don't know about you, Paul, but, most people don't have time to deal with something like that, right? To look at this kind of data and go, well, what of this is important? What's client traffic? What's server traffic? What's a shared service in my environment? What's a true integration, right? And if I find one of these lines actually matters, well, now I got to chase it to that next box and ask all these questions again. And so as I think about kind of moving the ball forward, it's like, frankly, I'm not even going to deal with this data. Instead, I'm just going to go talk to the app developers. They know. They'll tell me what I need to know in terms of dependency. And hopefully they're right. Hopefully they remember. Hopefully they weren't out late partying last night. And so, at the end of the day, we still have to talk to people. I know we all got into IT because we love talking to people. But what we want to do is enable you with a foundation based on data with which to have those conversations at both the strategic level when talking about business case, but then once that's settled, to have the good tactical information you're going to need to make those decisions and move that forward. So we're collecting all of this IP connectivity, processes, performance of these servers, and we use that to take this type of data, like pressing this little build AppStacks button up here, and transforming it into this type of information. So we're automatically going to go through your environment and build out application groups. So what this means is for things like, say, Active Directory, SolarWinds, Exchange, kind of common shared services, we've built profiles that, I know what processes an Exchange server runs. I know how it should communicate on a network. So if a device matches our profile, it's going to be grouped automatically. But, I'm sure you guys have custom applications or applications that we've never even seen before, profile things. And so we have to have a methodology through which we can provide you visibility into those custom applications in your environment. And so an example of that might be like this production CRM stack here, these 3 servers. And so we're looking at these. When this group began its life, it was not called production CRM. It was probably called something like, Auto App 5. And so we don't have that qualitative information with which to assign this thing a friendly name, but we are looking at how they're connecting, and we're saying, hey, look, based on how we see these connections happening, I think these servers are dependent upon one another. And that kind of begs a question, too, of like, well, okay, but what is that, right? What does this green line here represent? So I can click on this and see, okay, that's SQL traffic going back, TCP 1706. What's happening there? I can look at the processes running on this server to see, okay, what's going on here? And so as a part of this engagement, our team will work with you and your team on some applications to go through here and think about, how do you do application rationalization? How do we come in here and draw the lines of demarcation around our apps to understand dependency? We can come in and say, hey, let's look at this and look at external connectivity, right, at the host-to-host level. So here I see I'm connecting to System Center, right, or SolarWinds over there. There's domain controllers. Or maybe, the host-to-host level, maybe this is a little too much. So instead, let's zoom a level up and understand, how does my production CRM app integrate with the rest of my environment? What other apps is he talking to, and how can I see that in a visual way? And so we'll provide some visibility into those app-to-app integrations and dependencies, and can come in here and say, you know what, let me remove some of these unimportant ones, things like Active Directory or System Center or SolarWinds, right? Now I'm looking at this kind of kite thing over here. And so where do I really need to focus my time? And we'll also do some work in, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so we want to provide some visibility into that by creating a group we call out-of-scope services. So this is where we see connectivity happening very important connectivity, things like Oracle or NFS, where we're saying, hey, look, we weren't given a subnet to even do discovery on this particular part of the environment, but we're seeing really important connectivity, something you might want to look at and understand prior to moving, right? Let's not be Delta Airlines and leave planes on the ground for 2 days and lose $100 million. Let's provide some visibility into what we don't know so we can just make those decisions. So I've covered a lot of ground. I want to just stop for a minute and see, is everything I've covered, does it make sense so far? Any questions? Do you guys have this kind of data already?
So I think, so this all makes sense. I think you're talking about agentless discovery and then maybe some inferred stuff. So we have a tool from BMC called ADDM, which does something similar that's scanning the environment. So the value proposition here, though, is that you take this data and then you do something specific to make recommendations around AWS. Is that what we're looking at?
Yes. So specifically, yeah, absolutely. I'm familiar with ADDM. And often I'll hear those guys brought up. So one thing in terms of the grouping connectivity, a lot of this is we're doing this at the logical level, and this is happening automatically, right? So you're not having to make a whole lot of decisions about what is and what is not important. Now, that being said, we are also looking at the performance of these servers, right? So these 3 guys that make up this app. So at every polling interval, we're asking them, okay, what's your CPU utilization? What's your memory utilization? And bring that back. And so we'll use that data to do a 95th percentile CPU and memory calculation to provide an instance match to AWS. So, maybe you have a Ferrari on premise, that's what you provisioned, but you really most of the time you're driving your Ferrari like a Corolla. So let's provide you that Corolla pricing. And so what we'll do here is say, and you can see up here, this optimized IaaS cost, we're going to say, based on what we see, if you wanted to pick these 3 servers up and move them to AWS, that would cost about $3.57 a day to run. And I can view the details here and see, okay, well, what instance sizes are those, right? T2 micro, T2 small, T2 medium. And we'll provide those different pricing over here in a table in a little bit more detailed format.
Gotcha. And so this would be sort of, so this would be good for, a lift and shift, basically, right? So, I mean, if you were scanning like a web server farm, and let's just say that really we only needed 2 servers instead of 4, what this tool would tell us is that there's 4 servers way underutilized, and that we could go with the smallest set of 4 inside of Amazon, or will it tell us you can go with 2 and do an auto scale group, or?
So it would be the former.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it would be good for a lift and shift sort of. So this is what you've got on premise. This is what it would map to. Here's the most efficient way to map that to, the Amazon EC2 options, and here's what that cost would be. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we find a lot of customers when they're building out their business case justifications, like just understanding utilization can be pretty difficult. And so building pricing on, here's what's provisioned in our environment can often, you're just going to take an over-provisioned environment, which it should be if it's on-prem, and you're just going to move that up into the cloud, and it's like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose, right? You want to pay for what you use, not really for what you have. And we have additional functionality. I think it's just worth mentioning here real quickly, and then I'm going to kind of jump back into the performance, that we can also collect flow data, so accept like a NetFlow export or do packet capture on, say, a vSwitch or a port span. And so as I come up here, I can view all connections. And so even from a connectivity point of view, I can understand not just how my apps are interacting, but if we have access to the network layer, we'll use spanning tree to group IPs into what we believe are physical locations within an environment. So I can understand, how is my Chicago office accessing my particular CRM app or my London data center? And I can get behind all these details all the way down to source and desk ports, IPs, protocols, things that I'm dirty I want to get. But how am I going to build my security groups and firewalls? And if we're collecting flow data, if I jump back here, this is built on a socket-based model, my demo is, but here you can see we have the columns where I can understand how much traffic is going between my different apps. So I can understand, well, what size of direct connect do I need, right? Or how much bandwidth should I purchase or whatever. So we want to provide that visibility as well.
So what kind of discovery methods are you using? Is it sort of, I mean, I think what you said was there's an appliance that we would install on premise, and then it feeds your sort of SaaS environment here. But we would need to provide what, SSH credentials and some Windows credentials? Are those the means of discovery, or are there other things?
Yeah, so I'll just come here. So on our home page, if you come up to resources, and then over here on the left is a general resources link. So this middle column is really chock full of lots of good information. Now I'm going to go to our Cloudscape reference guide. And so in here we talk about kind of just the minimum requirements of the virtual appliance, local and internet connectivity we need, have a data flow diagram here, and then we go into our required credentials and parameters. So essentially that virtual appliance will take in the IP subnets you want us to do discovery on. So this is scope limited. You tell us where to go look. We take SNMP read-only streams for the network environment as well as the Linux Unix infrastructure. Now we just released SSH collection into beta for Linux, so that's available now in beta. And then for Windows, we'll use Windows domain or local administrator credential for WMI. And then we'll take VMware credentials for vCenter. And so that virtual appliance, basically it begins its life by doing an ICMP sweep of each of those subnets entered into the appliance. So we want to try and find as many IPs as we possibly can. Once we find those IPs, we're going to bring them back, use the credentials provided into the appliance, which all stay local. They are encrypted. We never see them. They never leave. To access those particular IPs and say, okay, who are you? What's your host name? How are you configured? And then from there, once we've successfully inventoried the environment, we move on to ongoing performance and dependency data collection. And that's what really we're using to build out a lot of our backend.
Okay, so effectively, I guess in our case, it would be SNMP and WMI.
Yes, in most cases, correct.
And so in the VMware case, does that pull performance data for the virtual machines?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we would need. So if they're all virtual machines, could we just get by with the VMware credentials, or do you get other things by using the SNMP or WMI access?
So primarily, so from VMware, we're only able to pull performance data. So to the extent that like all the, dependency
you won't get the dependencies, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And Zane, correct me if I'm wrong, but you also don't get the used storage, just allocated storage, right?
Yes.
From VMware.
Yes, that would be correct. Yeah, we wouldn't see that from VMware.
Yeah, I was just trying to see if I could eliminate some work, but it sounds like we would need all of those. Okay.
And so we'll also, so I was kind of showing some of that pricing back here, but I wanted to show you that we can do that. So that was just like one app, and I had just one region there. But we can also compare to other regions in AWS. We can show you within this dashboard who your most expensive hosts or most expensive apps are. So this is the whole environment, or I can select certain apps. I think the heat map down here is particularly interesting. So as I'm trying to build out strategy and business case, like by visualizing the data, it's like here I can see that in this environment, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 apps make up a very large percentage of cost. And so as I'm thinking about like what might be good to be in scope or out of scope, it's like as I look at this bottom right-hand corner down here, like there's a lot of apps down there that are really low cost that maybe make a lot of sense. And we'll also provide some visibility into like these guys with these really big network calls. So if you recall, I said we're doing this on a socket-based model, so you're probably like, how are you providing network cost? Well, the OS reports to us total data egress So this is kind of a worst case scenario estimation, right? This is if every server within that stack sent its data out. And so while that may not be the best representation, we do want to show that to you because I think it flags places where it's like, where do I maybe want to understand my data flows a little bit better to be sure that all of that traffic is inter-app and not going outside? And so how do I kind of prioritize? Or frankly, maybe these things, look, these are my Frankensteins, right? And Frankenstein is a monster. So let's just leave him on the table, right? Let's not let him get struck by lightning. I'm just going to go focus on the easy stuff right now. And so we want to provide some visibility into that performance data visually here. And we'll also, so we have functionality to do custom rules and rule sets. And so we'll also come through the environment and apply, we have a few rules just straight out of the box. And so we're going to do some R-score tagging as well as tiering within the environment. And so within this dashboard, I can understand who are my top internal and top external facing applications in terms of client connectivity. And then in terms of that R-score tagging, what does that look like in my apps? Like here's apps that, the OS of that server is not compatible to target clouds. So, where am I going to have to do some work that, what's not low-hanging fruit in my environment? Or let me flip this around and look at it by tier and see, what's the architecture of my apps? So maybe I want to pick kind of simple 2-tier, 3-tier web apps. Come down here and look at something like Customer Web 12. It's got one database and one web server. Okay, maybe that's where I want to focus my time. So for us, it's about trying to give you kind of good strategic data, and here's overall TCO. Here's we'll generate how every app within your environment talks to every other app. Right? This model here, which I like this visualization because I think it's I think this is the challenge a lot of people are dealing with. I mean, this thing is ugly. Right? This is a rat's nest of connectivity, but networks are not easy. And understanding how a particular app connects to the rest of the environment, or what if I remove particular shared services? How can I get a sense of my production environment? Right? What's highly connected? I can see that I have this, there's a shared DB. Let me just find him here. Shared DB, yeah, there he is. Who's highly connected in this environment. So as I'm even thinking about my strategy, maybe I want to do, PaaS or something, right? Maybe I'm going to think about doing RDS in Amazon because, frankly, I have all this interdependency on databases. So maybe it's going to be easier to move data than it is to be just lift and shift a particular box. And so we want to provide you that strategic information to sort of think about how you're going to build out your plan and provide those business cases, but then at the same time get a good tactical information that when it's go time, you have what you need to kind of make those decisions, move things forward, and we'll even do some, so we come from a network assessment background. So Cisco Systems is a big partner of ours to do network health checks, but part of that DNA is still in this product, and we'll show you, here's issues we see in your environment. So, my Exchange server stack has 18 problems. Well, what are those? Okay, it has logical disk exhaustion and max memory utilization. And so here are problems that I'm going to have to solve no matter what I do. And cloud is a good solution to fix some of these problems for me. So I have visibility to the app, so I can put this in context of the business. And so let's just move it forward. And so this is kind of the combination of all the different data we'll use. And I know it can be, to a certain extent, overwhelming at times. But we're trying to get you that strategic information for this business case. And then as you guys kind of work through that and make time to go, that you're prepared and ready to move from that place.
So how does this differentiate itself from what we already own? Because to Tony's point, we already own ADDM. We can get to a lot of this data. We have people that understand. If I take the Sydney data center, the people that we do have understand the environment quite well. So I'm struggling to see why I need this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good. I mean, if you're, I mean, if your guys know they're
Zane, let me jump in here.
Yeah.
And I apologize. I haven't had a chance to review your data specifically to see if it fits all the needs of what we need to start building the financial model. Maybe I had the wrong assumption that we needed to come in here and do this level of work, and maybe the CMDB data that you have dumped would allow us to do this. This is a program that we offered in case you felt like your data wasn't as complete, right? That allows us to rapidly move through this, but we can absolutely take a start with your data. Oftentimes we find that we end up right back here, working with this tool to make the assumptions. And also it just automates that jump from the data you have to the recommendations versus going through and manually creating all that work.
Right. Okay. And then, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to piece together how all this works. I'm not sure I fully understand it at this point. So RISC Networks is effectively a provider of a tool that allows you as Amazon to help us with the sizing and providing us costs for our city data center in AWS, and also potentially provide some consultancy services or some help around making the shift. Is that?
Well, yeah. So RISC as a tool does a lot more than that. The way that Amazon and RISC are partnering for this specific opportunity is what you had just said, right? We want to get in and build a high confidence scope for potential migration in your Sydney and maybe Frankfurt data centers, and not just generate a list of systems and how much CPU they have, but build a right-sized, cloud-optimized model with of the systems with the financial part of it, so that we can help move Morningstar forward towards the migration.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense.
And ideally, to boil it down, and Zane, I don't want to boil it down too far, but this is something that if we can get engaged with your team, the professional services team at RISC does a lot of the button pushing. So they would collect the inputs from you. What are the subnets? What are the credentials? Help us get the appliance installed in your vSphere, and then they would help. It would be as light a touch as possible on you, so that we don't have, and we're not tapping your team members on a regular basis to do the work, right? We're tapping your team members to help us get the data and maybe remove blockers as we encounter them, firewalls or incorrect SNMP strings. But we don't want to be a burden on you in collecting this data.
Right. Okay, and then what's in it? What's in it for RISC Networks? We're talking about kind of a free discovery. What does the cost become after that kind of?
I'll phrase that in two ways. One, Amazon is paying RISC for this engagement, so they are getting paid, right? We see the long-term value of your workloads moving to AWS, and we're willing to make this investment. We do believe that RISC is an amazing partner when it comes to discovering all these application dependencies, both for the purposes of building a prioritized backlog for your migration, as well as just long-term, health inside your environment. So I think there is a hope that you'll see the long-term value of this outside this one engagement, and potentially want to continue to engage with RISC. But that's between you and RISC.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, David, that I totally agree there, and I think to the extent, Paul, that listen, we run and you get this data back, and your team's like, hey, that was cool, but frankly, we have all this and don't need it already. Like, I'm just interested in helping and creating value, right? And so if we're not able to do that, then hey, no harm, no foul. But we've worked with lots of our particular technology has been deployed nearly 10,000 times. And I find often that people have lots of different tools, and there's kind of this, if you think of it as a Venn diagram, that there's lots of, sort of tangential overlap here. BMC does this, and, vRealize whatever does this, and there's all these pieces. But, sometimes if you have a nail that you need to hammer, then use a hammer. Right, and so that's kind of where we're stepping in and trying to just help you do that.
Okay. So our obligation towards this would be is kind of zero in a sense, you know. So you guys would come in, help inventory the environment with this tool. That then gets fed back to Amazon, who can then help us with build a professional services proposal around it, right?
Absolutely.
And then, you know, we have no obligation to continue to pay for this tool or continue to keep it. I mean, we might decide that it's useful, but you know, in the longer term, we might not. I mean, and if we wanted to use it, say, to move more workflows into AWS, so, you know, say we decided we wanted to move another data center, say in China, into AWS as well, could we reuse this tool in the same way in order to enable that migration?
Yes.
We could, but at zero cost, right? So it just as part of the engagement with Amazon, right?
Well, I'd love to get through the first couple data centers and let you see the results that we're able to generate from this, and then hopefully roll into analyzing more of your data centers with the assumption that as we look to the first quarter of 2017, if we did an analysis in the last quarter of 2016, that data would probably still be good, you know, well enough to plan with. Right, versus coming back in 9 months and trying to secure the funding again to do this. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, and I think Frankfurt and Sydney is probably as far as we're going to get in that sense. So, you know, if we're talking about this engagement in the last part of this year to collect the data, I think kind of getting anything beyond those two data centers would probably be a little bit of a stretch. You'd probably have to be re kind of collecting data again by the time we got to them.
Understood.
Yes, that makes sense. Okay.
So you think based on all that, you're maybe inclined to move forward?
Well, I don't see any reason not to, if that's the way I'm understanding it. I mean, as far as we're concerned, there's no obligation to this. I mean, what we're doing is we're collecting data to allow Amazon to come back with a professional services proposal and a configuration in AWS, right?
Yeah, exactly. And any resulting data, obviously, you're going to have the raw access to the raw data. So to whatever end that helps you refresh your CMDB, great.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know if there's any reason not to do this. How would a professional services engagement work? Who does that for us? Specifically in Sydney, actually.
Are you talking about for the actual migration?
Yeah. So if we take all this, we go, yeah, it looks great. Let's move all this stuff into Amazon. Let's not do it on-prem anymore. Let's forklift the whole Sydney data center in. How do we move this forward then? You know, I'm quite keen to ensure that whoever we're engaging with would be able to engage in Sydney with our resources there, because I think that's probably the only way it works successfully.
We would say, so when Amazon builds our proposal for your migration, it will be a proposal that includes the resulting scope from this discovery, right? Yeah. So let's say the Sydney data center. We'll have broken it down at a high level on the migration patterns, how much is going to be lift and shifted, how much is going to be replatformed, what migration tools we would suggest using, what the staffing model would be from a perspective of how many people we think we would need from your team, and you've already told us you've got limited staff in that area, and how many people we think we would need to bring in from Amazon professional services and or an Amazon partner, potentially a partner that maybe has a strong presence in the Sydney area. And we would put that proposal together, and then you'd have an engagement with Amazon professional services and potentially an Amazon services partner to go execute the migration.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is building the plan, and a big part of the plan is what is the staffing model we need to move this scope using what tools in what timeline.
Yep.
And if you don't already have partners that you're familiar working with, then we've got plenty of partners in our Amazon partner network that we suggest to bring in to execute those pro services alongside our own professional services in a leadership role.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense.
So if that's what we're leaving it at, then, you know, we can get engaged as soon as you guys are ready to. And like you said, there's no hook necessarily for you guys with RISC. There's an investment. We do need your team's participation, obviously.
Right.
So the degree that you know, when you can allocate when your teams would be ready to hop on the phone with RISC and start working on mapping out what subnets are going to be, you know, subnets and credentials and how we're going to get the appliance installed, we can start pretty quickly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we probably need to just absorb that. Try and have a bit of a discussion internally and try and figure out whether that's what we want to do. I mean, on the face of it, it looks like it. We can go from there. I think it's probably the only way we're going to get to the kind of full proposal, I suppose.
Pratul, did you have anything else?
No. So yeah. So that's pretty cool. So Paul, I hope you found this, to be useful. And the reason why why we were proposing this, right? Because as part of a larger plan, I mean, of course, we're focusing on Australia. Let's just focus there. The idea behind getting RISC involved is to get to the really nitty-gritties of the migration, help build a very, very robust plan, and like David mentioned, get professional services and or a certified partner in Australia involved to undertake the actual migration, and all of the data that RISC produces will be featuring into that proposal, at which point you can take an informed decision.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Let's just check in internally and make sure everyone's okay with that. We just need to make sure that Dan's available. I mean, because I think you said there was some time constraints on this, right, Pratul?
Yes, and David, please correct me if I'm wrong, right? So essentially, from what I had last spoken to that, and David, let me know if this still holds true, is that we do have to have an agreement and a contract signed by the end of the year. So I know that initially it was not, but I've been able to convince the team to say, if we can get the funding allocated, because the funding is only available for this year, 2016, the funding that David talked about, which will eventually sponsor RISC's efforts. So if you get the contract signed by, let's say, December 15th or so, and then eventually they can get started, earlier the better, of course, and then that's when they can get started, whenever the contract gets signed. So the contract needs to be signed within a year. And David, please correct me if that still holds true. Yeah.
I think it's not even so far as a contract so much as an email letting us know that you're inclined to move forward. Because Zane, correct me if I'm wrong, this, since we're paying you guys, between you and the customer, this effectively looks like a $0 SOW, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just our EULA that gets agreed to when the appliance is deployed. Is really that's the only kind of paperwork per se that we have. So
we can allocate the budget.
Our ProServe team has about a 2-week-ish lead time right now. But.
So Paul, we'll allocate the budget to pay for RISC as soon as you send us an email through Pratul saying you want to move forward.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just want to check in with mate, we've got one guy really down in Sydney who kind of knows everything about our infrastructure. He's a bit of a single point of failure, to be honest, but we need to make sure that he's available to help with all this, everything else, because it's not like we can. Our infrastructure in Sydney as well is not kind of standardised in the same way as most of our other locations, so we're very much dependent upon Dan's time to make all this happen. So I need to check in with him, make sure it's all okay, that he doesn't sort of see any problems.
Okay.
Right, and I did end up recording this meeting. I apologize, I should have informed you earlier, but I did end up recording this meeting. So after this meeting, once I get the recording link, I'll share it with you, Paul and Tony and Sarah, and you can ship it over to Dan, and so that you can at least view it offline and see the value that RISC brings to the table.
Yeah, okay, that'd be great. All right, makes sense.
All right, thanks everyone for the time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey,
thanks, guys.
Hey, Tony.
Nice meeting you.
Likewise. Tony, can you hold on for 2 minutes, please? And David?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks a lot,
Have a good
Sarah.
weekend.
Thanks, Paul. Have a good weekend.
Thanks.
Hey, excellent. Hey, Tony.
Yes, sir.
Since I have David on the line, right? So remember how we were going back and forth about you needing some help to evaluate your POC applications right now?
Yeah.
So can you help me articulate that to David? David, I'll need your help to articulate that back to Peter and team, please.
So let me. Yeah. So why don't I articulate what I had sort of sent over, and then let me share with you an update because maybe that helps. So internally, right, we're getting, I don't want to say pressure, but we're getting questions about, are we doing the right thing in Amazon? Is it set up right? So on and so forth. Not because people are doubting what we're doing, but since we're doing the POC, they just want to have, more of a gut check from someone else that's done this before. So that's where it's all come from. And the idea or the message we're receiving is that they want it to be lightweight and not burdensome to anybody involved. And it's analogous to, so one of our security groups has this arrangement with a vendor where it's basically phone a friend for security, and I think that's sort of the idea behind the request from these other folks. And so when we're talking, I mean, my view is that security is complicated. It has a finite number of things to kind of deal with, and you could probably find sort of a boutique security firm to kind of do it. But the Amazon ecosystem has got a lot more services, and I'm not sure if there are boutique enough firms that can do something lightweight. And if they are, I don't even know if you guys would be able to recommend them, because presumably they would have to go through some certification process to be part of, one of your partners, and then I'm assuming there's a bit of a less boutiquiness about them if that's what they're doing. So that's sort of what the backstory was on it. And then, yesterday, and then, so what happened? Yesterday, so on Tuesday, we had Steve in, our solutions architect, and a lot more people got FaceTime with Steve this time around because they had questions. Steve's been available, he's been in here, but just people didn't have anything to ask him at the time. So this time, a bunch of those people got some FaceTime with him, and we're happy with that level of engagement. So the feedback to me then was, but he's only here, and this isn't a knock, I understand why. He's only here, every 5 or so weeks. And the thinking was maybe that's just not quite enough. We need someone exactly like that, but maybe just a little bit sooner. But we don't want to have to pay for, TAM or anything like that. So then we were kicking around the idea as another option was maybe we could time slice a little bit more of Steve's time just on a WebEx or a conference call, to kind of bridge the gap between the on-site visits. So that's what was kicked around yesterday by a bunch of folks, and that's just sort of where it all landed.
Yeah, and I get it, right? I mean, and unfortunately, the way it works right now, I mean, I only have limited of Steve's time because Steve's pretty much supporting me on this pro bono, if you will, in the sense that he's effectively not my assigned solutions architect, right? But because he got started with you guys, I've been able to convince him to continue with it because I didn't want to make any changes with respect to the kind of support that he was providing, and he was okay with that, right? With that being said, which is why I want to get either a partner or a professional services team involved to get you that ad hoc, high touch point help in between with Steve not being available, because by virtue of him supporting other account managers at this point in time. So which is why I want to get at a lower level, get a professional services team involved and or a partner involved who's just available, talking to you, who's available to you, like I said, phone a friend, and they know that they are engaged with you at any given point in time. You can reach out to them, local as far as possible, so that they can hop into the office as and when the case may be, when you need them. I've of course scheduled it, and then provide a lot more high touch points. So that was my idea. David, do you see where this is all going now? David, are you on mute? Please tell me you didn't drop off. Oh my God. Okay, let me ping him. Give me 1 second, Tony.
Sure.
Okay, I think I don't know if he dropped off. I can't hear you. Give me 1 second. You on the call again? Oh, so he dropped. Oh shoot. Okay. Let me ask him. Let me ask him to join back in. I won't ask you to repeat it. I'll just fill him in just so that he can ask you questions.
Sure.
Hey, David.
Sorry about that.
Hey.
I thought I heard some folks saying goodbye. I thought we were done.
No, I thought I asked you to stop by, but I guess you missed the most important part. Anyways, I don't want Tony to repeat. So this goes back to my request.
I don't mind. I don't mind because I think that's probably easy.
Yeah.
That way you don't have to third party it for me. So we've been getting. So there's been some internal pressure on me, and pressure in a good way, not necessarily a bad way, about are we doing the right thing in Amazon? Should we keep going? Do we need to change course? Are we architecting things right? Are we future-proofing ourselves? All that sort of stuff that you would think people that are overseeing things at a high level might sort of ask. And then a lot of people started chiming in, and it was basically, why don't we enter into an agreement where someone can basically spot check what we're doing and make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success, in the future with Amazon. And so my feedback to those folks was, we have a solutions architect that comes and sits in our office, every 4, 5, 6 weeks, depending on sort of what's going on. And more recently, and not a lot of people have been able to take advantage of that because they weren't fully engaged in the Amazon project yet. So that was sort of the backdrop, and they were sort of asking for some more help in that area. And someone internally on our security team has got an arrangement with a particular vendor, for example, that they can just phone them up and ask them pretty much any security question. What we're hearing from our executive team really is they don't want really a heavy engagement. They want a lightweight engagement to the point that they're asking us to look into, boutique firms that can sort of help with us in that regard. And so what I said to them is, we've got this solutions architect. He comes in every, 6 weeks, sits in here and answers all of our questions, and that's kind of what he does. And it's been very successful. And then even, this week, more people got access to him because they now have questions for him, and we're able to. And there was a lot of value actually that people got out of our solutions architect, Steve. So then they started rethinking. Well, what if we just got access to Steve more frequently, right? What if we did like a WebEx or a conference call every 3 weeks, and then on the other third week, then he's sort of in the office, and people are sort of amenable to some arrangement like that. That's pretty much where it ended. And
right.
We don't want a heavy. What I was telling Pratul is what the request is not to have a heavy engagement, because I think there's not an appetite for consultants in sort of the formalist of senses here, in IT anyway. And we didn't know if the Amazon Partner Network would allow us to get more of a boutique-y type of firm, because there's presumably some things you need to do in order to make yourself part of the partner network that might just bump you out of that boutique class. But at the same time, we didn't actually know if there was someone that was boutique-y enough that could cover the vast array of services that Amazon offers. And so that's sort of the background on the request.
Right. So David, this goes back to my conversation with Peter and emails back and forth, right, as to why this is needed and why the solutions architect cannot do it himself. The problem that I have with Steve's more time is because I'm actually his fourth assigned account manager, and he really doesn't have the time to spare more than what he's already doing right now. He's not even actually my assigned account manager, but because I started off on the Morningstar journey with him, he's been kind enough to continue on that, but I unfortunately cannot ask for more time, more than what he's already been putting in right now. He does help them over emails, right, back and forth, of course, depending upon his availability. He does help them with the on-site visits every once in 4 to 6 weeks. So we're doing what we're doing in terms of trying to best analyze and get Steve's time on that. But that's the most I can get out of him at this point in time, which is why I think involving professional services or involving a partner, if you will actually help give the additional help that Tony's looking for. Make sense?
It does, and I know that based in the outcome of your conversation with Peter, that he's amenable to hopping on the phone call and talking about a short engagement. But I don't know if Tony, if that's what you want, because while we could show up with professional services for a couple days and talk to some teams, we plan it out real well and really understand what our expected outcomes are. What it sounded like to me was this lighter touch over maybe a longer period of time where you have access to some skilled resources. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. There'll be bouts of burstiness as certain pieces of technology are just started to get adopted, right? But yeah, that's effectively what it is. Yeah.
And when you were talking about boutique, which is a great word, when I think about the Amazon Partner Network and the premier Amazon partners that are out there, I mean, they're skilled, experienced Amazon architects that are all of these partners are chomping at the bit at a chance to talk to a customer who wants to have a conversation. So I think there'd be a lot of great partners out there. When you say boutique, in my mind, I think, Amazon Partner Network members that are, boutique to big data or boutique to continuous integration deployment and DevOps or boutique to, ERP systems. What can you expand on that kind of boutique angle that you think you need?
Yeah, I think it is. So this is coming from our CTO, and I think so. What we have, just to give you a tangible example of what's not boutique, we have on premise. We've got a deployment of BMC products, and every time we need to do like an engagement with them, it's 6 weeks of planning and then 6 weeks of implementation, or whatever it is, and it's like that. So like Accenture, like that kind of space is not like
where it's just a long drawn out. You want someone who can drop in quickly, get something written, that's kind of loose without dragging you through a bunch of assessments.
Yeah, it's basically a bunch of Steve Baltics, like people like that just know, which I realize is probably hard to find, but it's just people that have because we don't need, I don't think the ask is definitely not for someone that can go like 400 level deep on one specific service. It's more or less, because we have got technical people that can read and dive into documentation with just the right bit of pushing. I think what they're asking for is someone, not 100 level, but someone like Steve who's like 200, 250 level on the major services. We're not looking at like the Internet of Things or any gaming situation. We're a SaaS-based provider, that kind of thing. So that's sort of all that I think that's what the spirit of it is.
That's where the bulk of the APN consultants would live, right? So there are some boutique APN members, but the generalists I think land exactly what you're looking for. So Pratul, we can go back and we can talk to Peter, and maybe we should still have like a quick ProServe discussion. But I've got a couple of partners in mind that I think would jump on top of the chance to write a short scope of work that's a block of hours that says, hey, you want to call us and have a conversation every Tuesday? That's fine. You want us to show up for a day every other week? That's fine too.
Yes, please. So can we please explore that? The reason I wanted for you to hear this from Tony was because I, for some reason, wasn't able to articulate it as good as Tony just did. So.
Okay, and that helps a lot, Tony. I think I clearly understand what you want. I've got a couple partners in mind that have the experience with migrations as well, to think of it not only from a perspective of just general AWS, but also in the context of a migration. They'd be able to talk about that as well.
Yeah. I think it's even hard for me to articulate because it's like, how do you turn that into a scope of work? It's basically we want someone who we can ask questions to all the time, right?
It's a block of hours with a smart guy.
Yeah.
Where they're not going to be pushy and try to shove a bunch of prepackaged offerings on you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like a good example is we're migrating off of Akamai onto CloudFront, and it's like, what's the difference between the two platforms? I mean, like it's that kind of stuff and then it's going a little bit deeper into it. I mean, that's the kind of engagements that sort of. So I think you've got it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll help Pratul get that lined up for you.
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, David.
All right. Are we done? I don't want to drop too early.
No, we are done now. But can you please call me after this?
Yes, I can. I got a few more minutes.
And Tony, one last thing.
Yeah.
If so remember the request for the meeting with Mitch. If it's not happening, that's fine. I don't want to push it in November. If you can do it in December, that's fine too. I forgot to let Paul know. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ping Paul because he's going out for a week next week. So let me ping him before he leaves the office. He's in London. Let me ping him now before he leaves.
Yeah, just let him know that it's not necessary. Yeah.
I'm going to assume that's probably not going to happen based on some things happening here.
Okay.
In like it's not, and then so what did you say? Pretty much now. So it's pretty much out 2 months. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say December. Yes, December. In fact, I was talking to Sarah, and Sarah told me that given that you've just acquired PitchBook, and that Kunal is going to be in Seattle more often, so I'll actually probably even try to kind of set up an EBC with right from Kunal and Mitch together, if that's what it means.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony.
Yep.
Have a great
Thanks,
weekend.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.